Welcome back. Joining us to discuss the privacy and security professional of tomorrow, please welcome to the stage moderator Ruby Zepho, Trevor Hughes, and Matt Loeb.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I'm just going to dive right into it because we've got a short session. So,
excellent.
IAPP worked with Ohio State to release a recent research study, the topic of which was the convergence of the privacy, security, and to some extent, IT professional roles. So my question right out of the gate is, why is this happening, and why is it happening now? Is it technology? Is it culture? Is it politics? Is it, what's causing it?
Sure, so I'd be happy to start. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Trevor.
It's great to see you. Hi, Ruby. Great to be here. So we worked with Ohio State to create this paper because we were seeing something happening in the marketplace. We were seeing that the skills of the privacy professional born largely of law and compliance traditionally were bleeding into engineering and IT, we're bleeding into IT risk, we're bleeding into information security, and vice versa. And that solutions that were being created in those siloed domains were no longer sufficient to fully answer the risks, the challenges that were being faced across an organization. And looking at that, the board, the senior leadership at the IAPP said, we should start talking about how do we talk to those other professional domains? How do we talk to IT risk? How do we talk to information security professionals? And what are the skills that we need? Clearly, we cannot be masters of all domains. We have to have fluency, conversational skills across those spaces. That led to some conversations between Matt and myself. ISACA, of course, one of the leading organizations in the world for certifying professionals in information security and IT risk. And Matt can definitely tell us a bit more about that. But the minute that I raised the idea with Matt that we were seeing something, Matt immediately sprung back to me the idea that he was seeing something too, that ISACA was seeing something, and that there was a hybridized future for us where professionals did, again, not need to be experts in every single domain, but they needed to know enough so that they could maintain a conversation.
So Matt, what do you think is causing it? Like what lies behind this sudden, these fields have been around for a long time. Why does it suddenly seem, at least to me, that this has been a huge uptick in the need to have more collaborative solutions?
Well, I think there's just two things that it really comes down to. Number one is the continuing pace of change. It's getting faster around technology. So technology is now embedded in everything that everybody, every company, every government, every enterprise is involved. In fact, it's affecting our personal lives as well. From the enterprise standpoint, though, what's also happening simultaneously is this increase in complexity around the legal compliance and regulatory aspects of things. And part of this is really being driven by the fact that technology is generally for good. In fact, at ISACA, our purpose statement is to help you realize the positive potential of technology. But with that comes the requirement of looking at the risk aspects that technology brings to the table. And as a result, the focus on mitigating that risk is actually, I think, driving the issues around security and privacy. And it's really all one big bundle. And I think that puts a spotlight on what Trevor was talking about the need for this cross-pollination of knowledge. And actually it goes beyond privacy, security, and risk. I mean, our professionals also need to be, I would say everybody in this room needs to start having a grasp of what are the technologies that are affecting us today, and more importantly, also anticipating those new things that are going to come in and impact us.
Let me just carry on from that. I think in terms of causes, it's the digital economy. It's the rise of our digital lives and the technologies that are challenging us. They bring with them traditional IT engineering infosec concerns, and we are using tools from the legal and compliance world, privacy laws, many of which were really conceived of, at least the frameworks, 50 years ago. Our fair information practices that we're applying to these new standards were really designed 40 plus, almost 50 years ago. In fact, it is the 50th anniversary of the writing of Privacy and Freedom by Ellen Weston. And that is, I think, a notable anniversary for us this year, because that really was the first time we thought of this idea of control. We're seeing some tension there, and we need better and new solutions. And part of that is people who have worked in public policy, people who have worked in law and compliance, understanding how these new technologies are creating new issues.
So you said, you don't have to be an expert in everything, and we can't do everything. So what's enough? Like, how do we figure out how much is enough? Let's put a pin in today, put the future aside for a moment. What should people be doing right now that's enough to give them the background they need to do a good job?
So, I mean, it is a tough challenge because generally we've come up through our educational backgrounds and our experiences focused on things that we've become really good at. And now what's happening is we're being, in fact, this is kind of a phenomenon that has really plagued the engineering community for a long time, because now it's not just about electrical or mechanical or civil engineering. Now it's about engineering, and and we've added biologists to the mix and chemists to the mix, and all of us, and bringing it back to our space, we've all learned a language. And one of the hardest challenges first is communications, which is trying to understand the perspectives of others. And the reason that this is important is that the problems the challenges we're trying to address today are systems problems. So they all fit together, and part of our challenge is to understand how changing one variable is going to affect the other. And so in that, it comes to the fact that you may have your core area of expertise, but you're going to have to be a voracious reader, studier, listener to other people to capture that knowledge and make it part of fitting into your thought process. And it means that we have to be broader. We can have our specialty, but we really have to think more broadly across all of the aspects of the things that that we're being asked to deal with.
I think Matt's exactly right, and I want to restate one of the points he made. I think the Privacy Pro of today, the InfoSec Pro of today, and the Cyber Pro of the future needs to be a perennial student. You always have to be learning more, because technology and innovation is moving so quickly, it's really difficult to keep up with. Ruby, your question though was, what is enough, and what is the amount of knowledge that you need to learn as you cross-pollinate across these different domains? And I think the answer is, like so many things in our field, it depends. It depends on the role you're in, the organization you're in, the type of risks that you're facing. I came up through a privacy role in an online advertising company back in 99, 2000, and I had to know as a lawyer how cookies worked back then. I would argue that anyone that works in an online space today needs to understand how the technology of state management, the technology of things like cookies work, in order for them to understand the privacy controls that sit inside browsers, the things that are coming in the e-privacy directive in Europe. But that's just one small slice. Whatever it is for your organization, maybe you're in life sciences working on the human genome or DNA, and you need to understand some of the privacy implications that may emerge from using the human genome. And that is going to require a sophistication around what DNA can tell us and what providing results to someone might disclose about someone else. So it is role-based, and it's situational, it's contextual, but the thing that I know is that it is multi-denominational. It reaches across other domains. So a law student graduating today, not for 1 second should think that their education is sufficient for them to be a fully functioning and successful privacy lawyer going forward. They got to learn a lot more.
So what's interesting about what you were just saying, too, is that when, ISACA spends a lot more time working with the information security community and the people who are on the operational side. And what we're finding is that the traditional paths of education are becoming not irrelevant, but less and less important to some of these roles because, for instance, our lead in security at ISACA was an English major. Just happened to fall into the technology side, worked for NSA and a few other government agencies on things he can't talk about. Then he went back and got a master's in international business. The thing that's interesting when you talk to him, though, is that what you realize is that he has technology aptitude, so there's that thirst for learning. But the other aspect that brings into it is that whether it's security or privacy, when you're looking at your enterprise, there's this question of, do you understand the business that you're in?
Right.
Because even if you're an operational security person, when a breach happens, if you don't understand the construct of how your business works, if you don't understand the architecture of the technology system that's in place, it makes it very difficult to actually take the correct actions. So this is just, it's really complementary to the story you were talking about, the privacy route that you took.
And it does raise the point that academic institutions around the world really are still teaching in those siloed domains. I came up through political science, and we did not venture into the science buildings if we had any power not to, except for like the 1 or 2 mandatory science credits that we had to get in order to graduate. We've got to change that dynamic. We need humanities graduates to understand that they need to understand how technology affects society. And in order to do that, they have to understand a little bit about technology. And vice versa.
Yeah, whether they're in our field or not, really.
Exactly, exactly. And so computer science graduates need to understand a little bit about ethics and a little bit about privacy and a little bit about
more than
politics. Yeah, maybe,
more than a
maybe a lot, maybe a lot. Exactly.
And the funny thing is, right, we can pick any of those disciplines. I mean, in biology, and there's probably people here in this audience who are working for pharma companies, and they probably know more about what I'm going to mention, but I mean, there's this system called CRISPR, which actually allows you to look at
assemble DNA strands.
That's right. Yep. And then when you think about the potential of, first of all, you're cataloging this, you're comparing it to other individuals, and then you think about customized medicine, but now you start layering on top of that, the people who are doing that work, if they're not thinking about privacy, if they're not thinking about security, if they're not thinking about social implications and ethical implications of the innovations that are happening. So I think all of these things are it's kind of like this big mass of stuff that's coming, and you have to just kind of figure out how do you cut through all of it to make sense out of it all.
So let's talk about that for a second. I agree with you that things are contextual, and by the way, a lot of us just fell right into our careers.
Right.
So, but now we're talking about particular fields where it may be more important. Is there a particular business type or field where this, convergence is most important that we get right now and should be prioritized over others?
Are you talking about industries?
Yeah, which industries are seeing?
It could be an industry, it could be anything where, I mean, when you've got to change, you try to go after the lowest hanging fruit, and if it works, you use that as a model as it trickles down, right? So I'm looking, what's the lowest hanging fruit here for us to start saying that needs the convergence now?
Yeah. And that's my answer too, is that the ubiquity of technological innovation is so complete. So many organizations are data-driven organizations today. So many organizations are technology-driven organizations. When I think of just the small IAPP, and we are a very small organization, the number of technologies that we use is dizzying. And our need to understand how our members' data is being used, I mean, that's a tall task for a small organization. So I don't think, Ruby, that there is sort of the early adopter of this convergence idea. The CyberPro of the future is not going to emerge in one place first. I actually think we are seeing that development across the global marketplace in many, many organizations. And I can tell you, I shared yesterday, we're just about at 33,000 members. We started the year at 25,000 members. We've added 8,000 members this year. There is a real resource strain in the marketplace. Privacy professionals, people with these hybridized skills They are in absolute hot and high demand. It is a tough market to find those kinds of people. And it really raises the importance of cross-functional training. You know, so for all of the traditional privacy pros in the audience, going out and getting some InfoSec experience, getting, maybe not experience, but training, doing programs from groups like ISACA, that's only going to make you a much more valuable asset inside your organization and improve the value of your contributions to your organization. And conversely, information security professionals, IT risk, even business management professionals, understanding enough about privacy so that you've got that spidey sense when a really dumb privacy decision gets put up on a whiteboard, you can say, hey guys, that doesn't seem right. Why don't we run that past Ruby and the privacy team, or let's run that up to the privacy group and see what happens. We need that kind of sophistication inside organizations.
So, I mean, two things you were really hitting on there, working in reverse order. I mean, the last thing is, again, comes back to this whole notion of systems thinking, right? So that when you're doing your work, being able to say, okay, what else is this going to impact, right? So if you're in information security, you have to be thinking about the privacy implications of everything. So that's actually becoming more of a second nature now. But the other point that you were talking about was, you know, we don't know, at least I didn't bring my crystal ball with me here, but we don't know how the markets are going to evolve in terms of how the work that we're all engaged in today and how that's going to change. So ISACA is a community of 160,000 business technology professionals. A large number of the people who have been engaged in our organization started in the area of information systems audit. You know, just assurance that the systems that we're using are going to work properly, that the data in is the data out. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, but what we're seeing now is that if you look at the makeup of information security departments now, most of them have already come with an ISACA credential in information systems audit. And now what we're also seeing is some of the people who have started out in information systems audit are looking at operational security, because that's a place where there's a huge gap. You know, who are the people that we're trusting to monitor the perimeters of our systems? And more importantly, who are the people that will want to count on when the breach happens? Because none of us are bulletproof from that regard. So we're seeing migration already there, and I think it's worth mentioning that maybe if we're having trouble finding the right people, that we also need to think about our expectations of who we're hiring. In the security space in particular, every company wants somebody with credentials and 5 years of experience. It doesn't exist. And so one of the positions that we've taken is that we need to think about apprenticeship. And the fact that anybody with technology aptitude can actually learn how to do this work, as long as you've teamed them with somebody who is really good at it. Right. So there are sources in the security space. We talk about people who are completing their armed services careers, people who might be looking to do something different. In fact, our friends in the UK spent $1 million doing a test. They put 55 people from non-traditional experiences in a room in a 10-week program, bartenders, barbers, morticians, psychiatrists, and taught them how to do security work. 27 of them were employed literally within a month after the program.
That's great.
So let me ask the more difficult question. The convergence isn't 100%. I can tell you I've worked with difficult professionals on both sides who get entrenched. One example I think I still see a lot, just by way of example, is employee monitoring. Why wouldn't the CEO have a giant pissy fit about protecting the IP, right? It's job one, like don't let the IP out. I don't care if it's a negligent employee, a reckless one, or a angry intentional one. Do what you have to make sure the employees aren't losing our IP. And then the privacy professional comes along and says, well, we probably shouldn't put CCTV cameras behind every potted plant just because Harvey Weinstein entered the building. So Come on, it's not too soon. And so I have these kinds of, I do both, so I'm in the middle of these conversations a lot, and I understand both sides. How, and then they get polarized, it's an us or them, right?
Right.
How do you create a stake for each side now in the game so that they're collaborating on a solution that isn't the loudest one wins, that isn't the biggest budget wins, but the company wins?
Sure. So it's a great question, and it is a classic tension. And I think the answer is the answer, and that is those two sides need to understand more about the interests and the positions of the other side. And we only get that point, we get to that understanding when they have a bit of fluency and a bit of experience on the other side of the fence. So for a privacy professional who may be driven by a strong interest in protecting employee privacy, understanding that competing interest in IP security within the organization, or just even physical security within the organization that demands that there are CCTV cameras in certain places. The Privacy Pro needs to put into their algorithm of what is an appropriate response in terms of privacy for that situation, those interests as well. So too does the Security Pro need to understand that, yeah, there probably doesn't need to be a camera behind every potted plant. Where are your interests? How can we focus on them? How can we resolve them in the least privacy intrusive way possible? When we do have to implement things like CCTV cameras or email monitoring or whatever it is from an employee monitoring perspective, how can we make sure that employees are aware of it, that they are recognizing when it's being used, that they have the ability to raise concerns about it? How do you engage a dialogue between the privacy and security functions? When we have both of those sides recognizing the legitimacy of each other's interests, then you have a powerful dialogue. And I don't know what the ultimate answer ever will be. I think that's something that needs to be worked through for every organization. And sometimes the CEO may say, you know what, IP, that's the crown jewels for our shop, and every potted plant gets a CCTV camera, full stop. That might be the answer. Might not be the right answer for other organizations, and it's a dialogue that has to happen between the privacy and security pros.
So Matt, do you have any privacy and security whisperer techniques where you are able to plant the bug successfully in a gentle way?
Well, you know, I think Trevor makes one point that's really important again, and we're coming back to, you know, how do we all communicate? How do we all get along? And I think we really need to be thinking about walking in the other's shoes. And I'll come back to your original question. You know, when you start thinking about this, right, we can talk today about security and privacy professionals talking more together, but security and privacy professionals also have to talk to a whole lot of other people in the organization. And it all, to me, is coming up to, and this may be reflective of my sociology background, but I mean, it's all about culture. The cultures of organizations are changing. And a lot of what we're dealing with today is, it is new, because when we talk about security and privacy and risk, the biggest vulnerability in all of that is people. And so in order for us to be effective as security and privacy professionals, we have to understand the people side. And we have to be thinking about the implications of the things that we're doing and the stands that we're taking, and being able to articulate that to people who may not be as close to what we're doing, but we have to do it with a lot of empathy and understanding to what their situation is. I also think, back to that, how do you create that stake for everybody? I will take a risk myself and say, first of all, how many people in this room were affected by the Equifax breach?
Oh, all of us.
I can't believe every hand in this audience doesn't go up, because 143 million, I mean, that's you know, probably 75% of the adults in the United States. That could have been avoided by a simple patch. A simple patch. So I don't want to dwell on that issue, but I think it is illustrative of creating the stake that we're all in it together. And the stake to create in terms of how we build this culture of not only sharing our expertise, but also having understanding of what our fellow colleagues are doing and understanding the nature of the business. It's a system. If there's a hole in the system, we can lose. And so I think that just puts, means that we all have to double down on building more empathy into what we do, making sure we're taking time to explain it. I know the world's moving very fast, but we have to find ways to do this in a way that we understand what others are challenged with, so that we're all working together to make sure that we help our enterprises achieve the outcomes that they're trying to get to.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and I'd like to kind of go back to the keynote from last night, the one we're going to see in a few minutes, because I think the juxtaposition of their books brings up a very nice representation of how people feel about their privacy and security rights as individuals. So you have last night how we need to belong to tribes, and when people have their tribe taken away, they suffer greatly, and the community's gone. And then we'll hear in a few minutes about a man who probably valued his privacy and aloneness more than anything else and was willing to potentially die for it. And I think that's really the continuum we face in terms of how each individual views their privacy and security rights. So how can privacy and security individuals collaborate better to provide a more flexible and a custom, sort of customized privacy and data security for people, knowing people have such vast differences of opinion on what that means?
You first.
Wow. So let me tell you what I hear when I think of the two keynotes that we have. And we haven't heard Michael Finkel, and we're expecting a lot from him. I know he's backstage listening right now. Poor guy. But between these two keynotes, what I see for privacy and security professionals is job security. Because it turns out, I think it turns out that this idea of privacy is a human constant. This idea of a desire for a sense of security is a human constant. And so we need to share information with each other in order to stitch ourselves together within society. But we also concurrently need identity, autonomy, repose, a little bit of seclusion so that we can protect ourselves and find space to think different thoughts. And those two ideas are not perfectly aligned all the time. And when you intersect governments and other institutions of control, like corporations and others, you create a very complex environment. Then throw technology in the mix. What it adds up to is we are going to be renegotiating the terms of privacy and security forever, forever. And so when I think of what do these two keynotes mean and how can we be engaging it, it's don't look for the answer, because the answer is never going to be found. What you have to do is engage in the ongoing negotiation, the ongoing fight for us to be finding better answers over time. Because privacy and security are eternal negotiations of humanity. And we, as privacy and security professionals collectively, we have this amazingly awesome responsibility to try to defend that within society. That's a ridiculously cool job that we get to do, but it's also an incredibly complex and challenging job every day. Go, Matt.
And I think the spotlight is on us, Trevor, but the lessons are the fact that what you're describing going forward is actually demonstrated throughout history. I mean, for long before technology came into play, there were issues around information security and privacy. I mean, the military has been notorious over time about, the need to know. And so the notion of trying to keep that information, secure and private dates way back. You can actually look at security. If you go back to, if anybody here saw The Imitation Game, the story about Alan Turing and him cracking the Enigma code. What a great example of cybersecurity in its earliest demonstration. And at least that time it was for the good guys, right?
The white hat hacking.
That's right,
yeah.
That's right. This notion of continuing to redefinition, I would say there's two things. I mean, number one is some of it is being created by the fact that technology, which 80 years ago wasn't as much a part of our life, is now embedded in every aspect. Yep. And as a result, most of us that are old geezers like myself, we grew up with air, land, sea, space. but now it's air, land, sea, space, cyber. Cyber meaning that technology space.
Yep.
And that is actually helping us as security and privacy professionals. It's actually calling us to come really help try to solve issues that are being created by this new domain. And I'm sure we're going to figure it out. Maybe it's 15 years from now, and guess what? Then there's going to be something else on our doorstep, and we're going to have to be called in to do it again.
All right, well, we're out of time, so I wanted to thank you both. I thought it was a very thought-provoking beginning of a very long conversation, which, according to you, will be infinite.
Exactly.
But we all have job security, so thanks for that. And we have two organizations ready and willing to help us all learn and get out of our silos and do a better job. So thank you, and really looking forward to our next keynote.
Thanks, Ruby.